Good afternoon and welcome to this session on 5G remote production in the middle of nowhere. I'm Mark Smith. I run the Accelerator Media Innovation Program along with Mookie Kulhan, who you would have seen in the earlier session on 5G XR this morning. It's my great pleasure to be here. I've been leading the project since 2018, and we had the first 3 projects here at IBC, just 3 projects in 2019 before the pandemic hit. And then I was the only person, along with Morten from TV2, to come to Amsterdam in 2020 and actually film from these halls, which were empty during the pandemic, during IBC Week. So I'm the only one that was here in 2020, but I've been running the programs. We've done 8 projects in 2021 and 8 projects in 2022, 8 fabulous projects that are all showcased over there. To give you some background on the Accelerator Innovation Program, it's essentially a framework that IBC developed to enable and to empower collaborative innovation. So we have champions, who are the broadcasters, the studios, the people that come here to IBC to buy the technology. And then we have the participants, who are the vendors, the solution providers, those that come and help support the projects and drive the development of a potential solution. And that solution is showcased here as a proof of concept. So ultimately, the accelerators are about hands-on development, hands-on learning, learning by doing, experimenting. It's not about white papers. It's not about presentations. This is just the end part of it. The key part of this is learning by doing, and everybody working together learns about what can go wrong and how they can fix some of these solutions and how they can develop technologies for the future. So it's a fantastic program. We're launching a call for challenges after this IBC, so you can come and get involved. You can come and pitch a challenge. You can register your interest on the IBC website. And each of these projects have their own pod over there, and they have a little QR code, and you can go straight to their project pages. You can download the presentations afterwards. So before we get to the panel for this particular session, I'd like to introduce a great friend of the IBC Accelerator Program. In fact, it's our sponsor spotlight, and it's been a great pleasure to work with AMD Xilinx. And this is John Canning, by the way. So he's the Director of Developer Relations for Creative Sector for AMD, and you've been a great friend, you've been a great supporter of this program, and I'd like to hand over to you to say a few words, John, if that's okay.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. It's interesting and getting involved with the accelerators this year as AMD. Last year, I was involved with the accelerators as Digital Domain, and what I found through the program was, frankly, everything you've described actually is real about the Accelerator Program. It is a mosh pit of companies that come together to work on projects, to make things happen, to break things, to fix things, to then go, how do we do that in a way that I had not seen in a lot of programs like this before. So when coming to AMD, I said, AMD, we got to get involved. And lo and behold, we were involved in several of the different accelerators. Like, even before being a sponsor, it was like, no, look, our technology is there and there and there. We should probably sponsor this thing, don't you think? So it has been fantastic to be involved. It is an amazing program where the different projects have really exemplified how to pull multi-company projects together. And then the interesting thing in the XR project that I was the second year of, we're seeing, what are we going to do next year, right? This 5G remote production, I'm like, what are we going to do next year? Because now we've done this. Now where are we going to go? So with that, I think you're going to have a great time. It's an amazing project. Take it away, Mark.
Thank you so much, John. John Canning from AMD. And also, we'd like to thank our program sponsors, Microsoft, without whom. So this project, really, let's introduce the team behind this project. And it really follows the work of the accelerator over the last few years, looking at 5G in remote production. The first stage we looked at what we might do over a public mobile network. So we worked with Vodafone Ziggo here in Amsterdam in 2020. And the last 2 years, we've been working with both large manufacturers, but also a really amazing solution that's been developed here by the University of Strathclyde, which is in Glasgow in Scotland, which is a private 5G network in a box. And I'm not going to go too much detail about what that is because the team will describe it, but it's really been an incredible journey of learning how this can be applied in broadcast media. And so we're going to do we've done some amazing use cases that we're going to showcase here in August in countries in the middle of nowhere, like in the middle of Kenya, in the middle of New Zealand, and in the middle of Ireland, in Southern Ireland. And we're going to talk a bit about that. We'll show you some of those use cases. And we're going to go live to Scotland during this session as well, and the Highland Games that are happening actually in Scotland today. We thought they might be cancelled due to the events that have happened in the UK, but actually the new king has said that events don't have to be cancelled, they can go ahead. And it is a really prestigious event, the Highland Games. The royal family typically does attend, and it really is an amazing, unique, niche kind of sports, tossing the caber and throwing the hammer and some of the things that they do strangely in Scotland. And you might not believe it, but it's actually not raining there today, which is kind of a first in Scotland for some time. It's actually blue sky, I think. So I'd like to introduce, first of all, these are all of the companies that have been involved in this project. Now, way too many to mention, but you can see the champions I talked about. Strathclyde University here have been one of the champions. We've had support from the Scotland 5G Centre. Neutral Wireless is the commercial spin-off from the University of Strathclyde. We've got BBC and BT Sport and BT Media and Broadcast and RTE from Ireland and TV2 and Warner Brothers Discovery and Olympic Broadcasting and Paramount. Those are the champions. What a lineup of amazing household names that are champions. And then the participants, AMD, you just heard from John, Microsoft have been involved in this project, Vislink, who bought Mobile Viewpoint, Net Insight, AWS, Haivision, Zigzee, Newlink. We've had others like the Interim Maori Spectrum Commission in New Zealand, which actually owns 20% of the spectrum there, and Singular Live on the graphics side. And partners at QTV in Scotland, What's Good Media in Kenya, Wakata Maori TV in New Zealand, and in Ireland RTE, our production partners. So with all of that, I think it's important to name check everybody there that's been involved in the programme. And I'd like to kind of then move to welcoming our panel. We've got a lot to get through in the next 20, 25, 30 minutes, explaining some of these use cases around the world. And so I'd like to introduce our panel. First of all, can I welcome Malcolm Brew? Malcolm is the Senior Research Fellow in Electronic Engineering from the University of Strathclyde, and you can see he's resplendent in his Scottish trews here. And he's from Strathclyde University. So Malcolm has been really much of the engineering brains as well as the team. We've got Sam over there and some of other members of the team from Strathclyde who've really been the brains behind this. And then I'd like to welcome Paminda Gandhu from the BBC. Paminda has been really driving our kind of work stream, which has been looking at low Earth orbit satellites in this particular use case. Please sit anywhere. I want to get some water. Do you want to grab one? And then we've got, I'd like to welcome Matt Stagg, who's been part of this journey all the way along. Matt is he's the head of, director of mobile and immersive strategy for BT Sport. And Matt's really been a fantastic supporter, and he's actually put this particular private 5G network into action in some live sport on BT Sport as we've been developing this. And then I'd like to welcome Cameron Spears. Cameron is the Chief Commercial Officer for Neutral Wireless, which is the spin-off University of Strathclyde. So Cameron's responsible for what next with this particular network. So fantastic to see you all here, and I'd like to welcome you to IBC. And I'd like basically to take us through some of the things that we've been doing. Matt, why don't you just talk a little bit, because I think we need to provide some context of where we've come from here. And you've been doing some very specific work on trialing this private 5G network.
Yes, thanks for everyone for turning up. So we were very early adopters of 5G, mainly because we had a lot of access to pre-standards because we were part of BT Group, and they have the UK's biggest 5G provider. So, but we realised that we weren't going to be able to entrust our production to a network that everybody else shares, especially when you start to look at high footfall stadiums. Everybody is doing what people do. They're filming personal broadcasts, sending stuff. Files are getting massive because cameras are getting a lot more pixels. So we thought that maybe there was talk of network slicing, where operators could cut a virtual piece at the network, and sort of that's yours, BT Sport or BBC. That hasn't come along, and actually, even when the feature's there in the network, it might not make commercial sense. So we really wanted to move on. We had the best, as an industry, most well-defined network. We wanted uplink, and we wanted someone to sign off an SLA. Really, I don't care about anything else. They can do it with smoke and mirrors, but that's our requirement. So then we saw the guys. Malcolm does the smoke and mirrors, and so we took in the UK now and many other geographies. The operators freed up some spectrum. So actually, we're not now at the behest of a mobile operator wanting to engage with us, and that's understandable. That it might not be in money, but 5G cameras are perfect for not just lack of rigging time, but it gives our directors freedom of creative freedom to go and move anything. So we tried it at Silverstone for the MotoGP. That was more of we were just going to send out on the bikes and see if it worked. It's going to be
behind the scenes trial.
Yes, just to see how it goes. And then we used some of that footage, but then we went in and did a full production of Premier League Rugby, Saracens versus Sale Sharks, I think. And that was exactly that. So we had the 5G network in a box, plugged in. We had access straight out of the truck into the cloud, and we did some cloud-based production, which we wouldn't have been able to do otherwise. And it's, it is now it's here. People are going, where do we buy it? That's no, yeah.
Well, we'll talk about some of the challenges of doing this. Perminder, BBC, and I'm sorry, I did forget to give your title, and you are the senior. You are the technology transfer and partnerships manager with the Edge leader of the Edge group, I think, with BBC. Is that right?
Correct. Absolutely, for the BBC, for all of the reasons that Matt's just laid out, having access to a network that's kind of ring-fenced in terms of production security, guaranteed upload speeds is absolutely what we need, and being able to just deploy that. Being involved with the accelerators since 2020, this project this year was absolutely a natural sort of outcome and progression of where we'd got to in the 2 previous years, and it's been really exciting to see that genesis of it developing.
And you've been working within the EBU as well, 5G Records. I know Ian, your colleague, has very much been leading some of that work, as well as applying some of this concept to things like the Commonwealth Games in Birmingham as well.
Yeah, so BBC R&D have also managed to construct their own private 5G network, and we managed to do some live trials of that at the Commonwealth Games recently, which were held in Birmingham, and we managed to do the baton relay arrival in Birmingham. So what we found was that we had 2 antennae that gave us a really broad range of coverage, very little contestation from other people, despite it being a very, very busy area. And obviously, as Matt was saying, the cameras are there, being able to provide that creative flexibility and also being able to respond to events as they happen is really, really important.
But your work with Strathclyde goes back quite a few years now, doesn't it, to some trials that you did, I think, in the Orkney Islands in Scotland as well, using private 5G. Malcolm, I think that's where you first kind of got to work with the BBC on some of this.
Well, it goes back even further than that. I think we first started to work with BBC in 2009, 2010 on the idea of shared spectrum. And we did that with BT. And we built some very early UK's first TV white space networks, and it's through that work that and that's actually one of the things. If you want to build a private 5G network, you must have access to spectrum. So again, it's been 12 years in the making, and 2 years ago in UK, Ofcom have opened up, and the spectrum that we're using in the hall today and for all of these productions is this the top end of N77, so 3.8 to 4.2 gigs.
And how much have you typically got there?
Well, there's 400 megahertz of contiguous clear spectrum, and Ofcom have done something quite interesting, and hopefully others will follow, where actually they won't allow a public operator to deploy in this spectrum. So it means the problem that we get at Silverstone or a rugby match, the public networks get bombed when 60,000, 100,000 people descend in the area. But if you have spectrum with no public SIMs or devices in, the spectrum's clean. And this is kind of going to what Parminder was saying. It's clear. It's a self-contained network. The QoS, it's a private network deployed. It's very light, burns very little power.
Yeah.
So it's ideal.
So the key ingredients, I mean, that's Ofcom in the UK. We had to get the spectrum here from the Dutch Radio Communications Agency that we're using here in the hall, and you can come and see the network in a box after this. What are the core ingredients you need? So you mentioned spectrum. You've got your private 5G network, and what does that consist of? Cameron, maybe you guys can double tag this.
Yeah, absolutely. So from the sort of private 5G perspective, what we're doing, as Malcolm has sort of described, is creating that sort of closed network, operating on whatever frequency band that we manage to get from the regulator to do that. That allows us the control that we can have, as Malcolm alluded to making sure that we control who has access to that. But in this type of use case, in the broadcast use case, we have further control. It's software-defined radio, so we can actually configure if you like, the network to be much more uplink biased, more uplink centric, which is absolutely critical for the sort of performance and throughputs that we would need from the sort of mobile broadcast community. And then, you put that into the context of you've got this sort of self-contained network interacting with user equipment, with cameras that are coming through that, which is fine if you're keeping that local. But then what happens when you actually want to get that sort of feed back out into the wider community, which is where some other sort of transport medium is required for backhaul.
So you've got your spectrum, you've got your network in a box, you've got your radio head, and you've got your core network, and you need to backhaul it.
Mm.
Yeah.
So what have you been experimenting with in that context? Maybe you can talk to that one, Matt, and you've all been involved.
So it's one of those things, and we'll get whatever we can. And that's the good thing with encoders now is, we've been bonding 4G for many years, but again, that was the problem with a contended network. So, and the business model for rolling out any network is a consumer based. And you're going to put all your money into downlink because that's what everyone wants to do. That's where you get bang for buck for the spectrum. So we set the network up, it's perfect, runs uncontested, as we said, but we got to get back either to a cloud-based production, back to the MCR. And that's where we said, really, we need to use this accelerator to start trying some of those things. So new things have come. So yes, if we had fiber, we would use that, which works perfectly. If you have it there, in most stadiums will. Then we need, we can use satellite, and Parminder did a load of work last time on looking at the low Earth orbit satellites.
Which we'll come to. There's a little explainer on that, yeah.
Then, we had a bit of 4G bonding with, some Starlink, and it's whatever we can get to get that amount of bandwidth. But we can also, if you needed to, you can do some mixing on site, so you're not sending every camera feed all the way back over that backhaul. So you can do some local production. And also, in the future, and I think it might be something we could look at for another accelerator, is how can we use edge computing to do some of that? It's software defined.
Right. So here, this is what Strathclyde University proposed back in April, and it was we're going to take this network that we've developed to the middle of nowhere and show that we can actually use broadcast cameras, and we can go live from literally the middle of a conservation area in Kenya, in a remote school in New Zealand, in a music festival in Southern Ireland, and today live in Scotland. So tell us about why you proposed to go to all these global locations and what you can do with some of these things in places like Kenya.
Well, indeed. I think the key challenge here in terms of in the middle of nowhere has different meaning in different contexts. So you take somewhere like the Ireland demonstration that we'll talk about. We're not actually in the middle of nowhere. We're in a town. But in terms of the infrastructure, I think as Matt was alluding to support that media broadcast, it's simply not there to connect into. So there is no sort of fibre backhaul readily. Even power can be an issue particularly if you're in that sort of portable or mobile context. So we chose these locations because we felt they demonstrated a slightly different use case or application for each one. But I think the key thing is bullet point 6. Is there a way in which we can come up with a sort of blueprint for this type of remote production whereby it actually replicates well across a number of these other things, so that bullet 5, being able to deploy that as quickly as possible, is actually made possible because of the sort of commonality that you have there.
Right. So actually, what's just happened in terms of kind of things that have developed in the time that we've been doing this? Tell us a little bit about the thinking toward today.
Well,
Malcolm.
There was one of the challenges is to rapidly deploy. So we set a goal that was set in April, was to deploy the network in 30 minutes. So out of the 4 places that we've popped the network up, we can bring up an MPN, a non-public network, in under 5 minutes. At the moment we've got it down into a flight case that's in a 4U flight case that weighs 32 kilos and burns 200 watts. So you can power it up off a very small DC to AC inverter out the back of a car. We've flown it in the hold of aeroplanes, kind of. So it is fit for purpose for broadcasters.
So for these various locations, you had to get the spectrum from the various regulators. And so then let's talk about this backhaul piece, because I think it's important just to give the context, Perminder, about low Earth orbit satellite for backhaul, because I think this has been one of our key learnings, hasn't it? Over 2 years now, we've been looking at this as a potential solution for backhaul. Tell us a little bit about what we've been experimenting with.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. When it became obvious that LEO was going to be a solution that broadcasters could absolutely deploy, and there was also standards being defined by 3GPP about non-terrestrial architecture within 5G standards. So we had to sort of think about how we might incorporate this in the future and what are some of the benefits and advantages that it might bring. So we've all heard of Starlink. Starlink's probably like the biggest name at the moment, just because they kind of, no pun intended, got off the ground a bit more quickly than some of the other manufacturers in this space. And we were in beta mode, weren't we, when we were starting talking about LEO, and some enthusiastic engineers at both the BBC and also our friends at TV2 in Denmark got their hands on the dish while it was in beta mode and started running some testing. So as this individual testing was going on, it became obvious that this was something that we should definitely think about incorporating into the accelerator. Obvious advantages, it's portable, low shipping costs, it's quick to set up, as Malcolm was talking about the non-public network as well. So being able to integrate those two things together just seems like a really great symbiotic relationship. Also, there's really massive cost advantages to it as well. So it's pretty affordable if you're looking at the consumer service. The dish is not too difficult to set up. It's easily accessible. Some of the challenges that are going on around Starlink, when we started our testing just over a year ago, not many people had a terminal. Therefore, access and speeds were pretty much fantastic as advertised. What we've noticed as time's gone on, that as certain sites get more congested with those subscriptions, there's less.
But there's a business version of Starlink now, which is a little bit more of a premium subscription model.
Yes. So actually, the business subscription is about supplying 2 antennae. Just looking at my notes, the subscription is about $500 a month. However, Strathclyde had already bonded 2 antennae and kind of, already successfully experimented with that. When we started, it was just a fixed subscription. Then the nomadic subscription came, which is intended for those people that have recreational vehicles and want to be able to move around and download their Netflix and whatever else. They've also now launched a maritime subscription. So they've done a deal with Royal Caribbean, I believe.
So we could take the private network out into the oceans at some point.
Yep.
Maybe. And they've also done a partnership with Hawaiian Airlines,
right? Okay.
To provide connectivity on board. We should also talk about people like OneWeb and Telesat
I was going to
as
say,
well.
yeah. So OneWeb were acquired by Eutelsat, weren't they? Which actually well known in this industry recently. And then I think a project, or is it Origin Blue, the Amazon?
So Amazon Kuiper. Interestingly, while I was just doing a bit of new research this week, OneWeb have actually done a deal with SpaceX to resume launches.
Wow.
Telesat's Lightspeed network, despite talking about it since 2018, we're still waiting for them to launch satellites. They're investing a lot of money into ground stations, but they are also proposing that they will have laser beam connectivity between their satellites in the low Earth orbit when that's up and running. And one of the biggest challenges at the moment is, the pandemic-induced availability of chipsets and other component parts. So the manufacture of these dishes probably isn't happening as quickly as some of these people would like. When it comes to Amazon's Kuiper project, not really many clues about where they want to go next or what's happening, apart from some adverts appearing in India for various jobs, which we could deduce that potentially they're going to do some launches from.
Well, we've found it hard to have a dialogue, frankly, haven't we, with some of the satellite providers, Starlink and others. And I think what we'd like to use this platform, we'd love to talk and have more of a, I guess, you guys would love to have.
Absolutely. I think that it's really important, as Matt was saying, as broadcasters, absolutely adept at using 4G. We're really good at that. At this point in the conversation with 5G, we would really like to be engaging as a vertical and be able to have those conversations and determine what those business models and SLAs might well be in the future. As we've now realised, we were talking about slicing as quite a high priority a year or so ago. Now, with the advent of the successful private network, maybe that's not the way that we want to go. And actually, for the mobile network operators to see that we're finding solutions to our own challenges should encourage the engagement. And absolutely, as you say, if we can talk to more of the satellite manufacturers and operators,
I think
still things to be worked out here, business models.
Well, this is it, and again, it comes back to anyone who's operating either a satellite network or a mobile network. We are quite a niche industry for someone like Starlink to engage with. However, we need to take a step back from and just look at our requirements. So guaranteed quality of experience, guaranteed bandwidth. We're not the only vertical that needs that. You've got education, medical imaging, all of those. Once they see the size of the pie in those requirements, doesn't matter what the vertical is because the money's there.
Good point. Great. I think we're going to have to whiz through some of the use cases that we've undertaken now in different places. There's a slide here on the sort of the big picture of the workflow. Do you want to just, Malcolm and Cameron, can you guys just take us through? And I think we're going to have to rattle through some of the different workflows. But of course, you can all come and talk to the guys. They've got all of this on their stand, on their pod over here as well. But let's run through the workflow at high level first, and then the individual use cases, Malcolm.
So wireless cameras, microphones, anything you can that runs over UDP or TCP/IP, run them out in your network. You can deploy. There's a 4U flight case being dragged through London. That's the base station. Out the back of the base station, we actually can split. We have a CUPS, control and user plane separation on-prem or in the location that we're making our production from. Backhaul could be, as we've been saying, fiber, Starlink, maybe whatever we can get our hands on and actually blend it, bond it, and then once we're out of the venue, we can land in the cloud or land directly as we are today at your where you want to kind of display or MCR. Let's call next door our MCR. So that's it.
So let's talk about Ireland first of all. And you went, Malcolm, with the team from your team from Strathclyde.
So we've got a very small RTE Volkswagen van. So again, it's very easy to deploy. The whole system was powered up out the back of this van. We're using very high gain. The thing about an MPN for broadcast, it's not about the downlink. It's actually the other way around. It's all about the uplink. So we have to use high gain sector antennas to receive this 23 dBm, very low. We measure the power of the cameras in milliwatts. So that's why we use large antennas to receive the uplink signals.
And you bonded 2 Starlinks here.
Oh, we bonded. Well, it was just one Starlink we used here.
Okay.
One Starlink we used here, and we streamed all the pictures from the middle of
Mullingar, yeah.
into RTE's MCR in
Dublin.
Dublin. Yeah.
And what kind of throughput speeds were you getting on that?
Yeah. Well, again, Starlink. Starlink is still. I think there are only 2,400 satellites at the moment. And they're still putting up more. I think Elon thinks it's 12,000 is a full constellation. So it's patchy sometimes. And today we're actually experiencing
a little bit of that in Scotland. Yeah,
we're at the edge of the footprint. It keeps on as he puts more satellites up. So we creep further up, and so it's work in progress.
So that's the workflow, and you know there's a bit of detail here. You might not be able to see it, of course, but. These are all available, these workflows, aren't they? They're on the website at the moment. If you can get the QR code from their pod over there, you can actually get these workflows and have a look at the detail. We've talked a little bit about Ireland. Let's talk about New Zealand. And Cameron, you very much led this, although Bob was there. Professor Stewart
I wasn't there in person, but the Neutral Wireless team were out there. So we've been working with the Interim Maori Spectrum Commission for the last year. They have actually got a sort of 50 meg channel at about 3.75 gigahertz, which has been secured by them for sort of test and evaluation purposes. And as an outcome of that, actually earlier this year, and you mentioned it before, they've actually secured the rights to 20% of all future commercial RF spectrum in New Zealand for nothing, for zero cost. So we were out there partly as a knowledge sharing, knowledge transfer. They took one of our networks in a box, in this case here operating in the N78 band, and we took that to a local Maori school where they did a martial arts class, and we worked with a local Maori television company who was one of the participants in this. And using Starlink, we pushed that feed back to Auckland, which was about an hour and a half distance away, traveling distance away from us. One of the very interesting things that brings us back to sort of John Cannon in the intro is that the Maori spectrum, the 50 megahertz of spectrum that was there, butted up against 2 degrees mobile. And we were wanting to set a frame structure that was biased towards heavy uplink.
No guard band between.
In this case here, we were looking to see whether a guard band would be necessary. Using the Xilinx RF SOC with our spectrum and low cost of spectrum analyzer overlay on it, we were able to demonstrate there was no sort of crosstalk, no leakage. Whereas in Ireland, we actually did put in 2 10 megahertz guard bands either side of the spectrum that we used there. So,
what spectrum frequency range was this in New Zealand?
What sort
of frequency range?
So it's at 3.75 gigahertz, a 50 hertz channel, and it went to the news. So we were actually doing all of this, and Maori News were actually coming in and sort of putting that out as the first 5G network on the Maori spectrum.
Okay.
So the flow diagram is very similar to what we saw in Ireland, essentially, and it's there for people to see more detail.
So we'll have a little bit of film of some of these as well in a minute, which you can continue talking about. But Kenya, middle of a conservation area near Mount Kenya, I believe, called the Old Pejeta Conservatory, a wildlife conservation area. And you actually went out there, Malcolm, didn't you? And this was different in that it wasn't Starlink.
Yeah.
Talk about this one.
So this was using, again, in the middle of nowhere. We actually used a microwave to get out of Old Pejeta, which is on the middle of the equator, into a terrestrial fiber, liquid telecom, and then down to the Kenyan Internet Exchange, where we then pushed to Instagram, YouTube, and it was actually quite a Kenyan thing that we did. It was and youth and a focus on conservation. And again, in the back of a van.
Did you use solar power? Was it solar power for this?
Solar-powered, yeah. It was purely solar-powered, and used a local Kenyan production company who'd never seen any 5G. I mean, they took to it like water, ducks to water. So,
and that was thanks to John Canning. It was a company called, a little production house called What's Good Media, I think they were.
And what's interesting is it's kind of set FFI, Flora and Fauna International, World Wildlife Fund. They want to use this now. They've seen it work and for virtual safaris. So again, some of the ideas of you don't have to fly down, or you can have a very slender carbon footprint and actually participate. And you'll see in some of the videos.
But also programs like sort of Nature Watch and some of the wildlife programs, it could be an invaluable use case for. Yeah. So the workflow there, I think you just described it, but just describe the nuances of this versus some of the others.
Yeah, so again, this in Kenya, we actually did two. We were given a license by the Kenyan Communications Authority to run in two different bands. We ran in N77, so up at 3.9 gigahertz. We also ran some tests in band 28 UHF spectrum. So in that spectrum, you can have, you could be 20 kilometers away with a wireless camera and work to a base station. So again, good for, and the Kenyans are very interested in this idea of shared spectrum, or to build private networks. So Old Pejeta and northern Kenya, there are lots of national parks. They are actually wanting to build their own private network to for anti-poaching, for actually enhanced tourist visitor features. So great stuff. And we're going back to Kenya.
We're going back to Kenya. So I think we're going to have some film of some of these: Ireland, Kenya, New Zealand. Let's just talk a little bit about that, because there's no sound, deliberately no sound here, because we're just going to talk about it. But you can get the full films. There's 5 minutes of each of these particular use cases online and on the pods over here. But this is the Mullingar in Southern Ireland, and we're going to talk a little bit just over the top of this video, but you can get the idea that brings to life some of those pictures. Now, we believe there's some world firsts here. So that idea of using Starlink for backhaul and bonding Starlinks, we think is a pretty unique world first in broadcast.
We're definitely bonding Starlink. We bonded 2 Starlinks, because Starlink has this, as it's an LEO, and these flights bat around at 17,000 kilometers, 500 kilometers above our heads. These flights come over all the time, so there is a quite aggressive handover between satellites. So we actually bond 2 Starlinks together, and with Matt, with a little bit of help from BT and EE, we've bonded 2 Starlinks and 2 4G modems. That's what we'll see in Scotland.
And we think this is the first 5G use in broadcast terms to broadcast live in Africa. Full stop.
Yep.
And the world's first the first used in New Zealand for 5G in broadcast.
Correct.
So 3 world firsts. How about that? We get a round of applause for that. All done in August. All of this, 3 use cases, remote production, middle of nowhere, all done in August this year. Amazing team at Strathclyde that pulled this off. We thought the challenge was going to be pretty steep, but they did it, and it's phenomenal, really. And I would encourage you all to go and have a look at these films in their full sense, with some of the commentary of the team talking about exactly what they were using here. But this has been a pretty extraordinary kind of thing that we've pulled off since you pitched this. So well done. From your point of view,
if you want one, Cameron will sell you one. Limited offer. They come with a pair of trousers like Malcolm's.
But we're going to go to Scotland in a few seconds, or a minute or two, I think we are. Now they're in Scotland, in Pitlochry, the Highland Games, as I mentioned, quite a prestigious, very unique sporting, I suppose, occasion, and it's very prestigious. The royal family attends, as I said, and we thought that actually the games were going to be cancelled today because of the sad events in the UK over this last few days. But the new king, King Charles III in England, which is very strange, in Great Britain, I should say, very strange to say, said that nobody, it should feel obligated to cancel events, and so they took a decision to go ahead with the Pitlochry Games. Which means that I think we can go to Scotland, and we can talk to Professor Robert Stewart, Bob, who actually is in Pitlochry, and he's going to talk us through some of these things. Hoping you can hear me there, Bob. Hoping you can hear me.
Welcome to the Pitlochry Highland Games. We're live here in Scotland. It's absolutely fantastic weather. This has been a fantastic event. We hope you've seen some of the live feeds we've been sending over to RAI in Amsterdam, and you've partaken in some observation of caber tossing and some of the Highland dancing and the other Scottish sports. Of course, it's really for us to tell us a little bit about the tech and what we're up to. So I'm actually going to pass to Kenny Barley. He's our lead engineer here from Strath SDR and Neutral Wireless. So Kenny, could I just pass to you to tell us what's going on?
Thanks. Okay, so here we've got a 5G standalone N77 radio network set up, and that's operating in the frequency 3950 megahertz. We're using a 100 megahertz wide channel with heavy uplink biasing. So we've basically got 7 slots uplink, 2 slots downlink. And that, combined with the quality of service settings we've configured in our user plane, basically means that it is very heavily optimized for uplink video. Now, our cell can do about 350 megabits per second in uplink. So if you think about that in terms of the number of camera feeds, you can do the maths there. So we've assembled some 5G UEs and attached these to encoders, which are located at each of the cameras. And these UEs are also providing a bubble of Wi-Fi, which each of the camera operators in your headsets are attached to for comms. Now, the video is encoded at 1080p and then sent across our 5G network. And that breaks out in our car, which has got the decoders and the vision mixers in it. And we've been sending the multi-viewer with the 4 camera feeds and also the program feed out to you in Amsterdam. So hopefully you've been able to see that today. Now, we are in a field. There's no fiber backhaul here. There's no copper backhaul either. So we're bonding 2 Starlink and 2 MNO SIMs. And combining all of that together, we're able to get a decent high uplink throughput and get a good resiliency as well.
Kenny, thank you very much. So I'd just like to maybe conclude by thanking everyone who's helped us with this IBC Media Accelerator project. It's been absolutely fantastic. And as you've heard, we've been to Kenya, we've been to New Zealand, we've been to Ireland, and we're now here finally in Scotland. Many thanks, of course, to our colleagues at QTV who've been here today with the 4 camera setup, doing the mixing. It's been a great experience for me. I'm not from that side of the world, the tech side. So, Mark, I'll just hand back to you, and that's us from the middle of nowhere in Scotland.
Well, a few challenges. Thank you, Bob. Thank you very much indeed to the team in Strathclyde. A few challenges, a few technical challenges, but that's all part of the learnings. That's what we're here for, right? To kind of figure what do you think could be causing some of the issues we've been seeing here?
Well, I think a lot of that's to do with the Starlink, right? Because of the make before break nature of how that connectivity happens, unfortunately, there's going to be some degradation.
We did. It's risky doing what we've just done, and we didn't quite pull it all off, but we travelled to Pitlochry 2 weeks ago to test everything, and everything worked fine. So it shows you we're at the edge of the footprint of Starlink. Starlink are putting in more satellites, and they're constantly moving their constellations. So because we were at the edge, and
it's not actually in the sweet spot of Starlink.
No, we're outside. We're actually outside their coverage, just on the edge. So,
but I think it's also worth saying, if we didn't have that, there's nothing coming out.
There's nothing would come out.
Unless you take up a huge satellite truck and all that expense. And that's where it comes in, is we're actually being able to democratize sports broadcasting. So it's that was an event that wouldn't have been televised. And then you look at stuff, then you start to say, well, actually, you get a 5G network for a sports club, put on an AI camera we've got now, and actually you're starting to be able to do really good productions at a sustainable price and a lower carbon footprint.
And also, it's not just about sporting experiences. So for the BBC, our remit is absolutely to ensure that we're serving all of our audiences and they're not underrepresented. So being able to cover things like local council meetings or smaller venues at the Edinburgh Fringe, for example. It's absolutely going to enable the way that we produce content.
It's going to bring more creative flexibility to productions. It's going to bring more cultural diversity to productions.
For news, for example, you can go with a plan to an event and then something changes. So being able to move and react to the story and have that mobility is just going to be a game changer.
I can still hear the bagpipes, which means that you could go over to the Strathclyde, to the project, the 5G remote production project pod over there, and you can see the live feeds as they're coming in, and you can sort of see the network in a box over there. You can go directly to the website to get all the films that we've showed and more, and the full presentation. And I think with that, we're kind of coming toward the end here. And I said it at the beginning, it's about hands-on learning. It's about real life experimentation with technologies in different combinations. We weren't comparing any of the technologies we used. It's about trialing things in different combinations. And things do go wrong, and things can go wrong. And that's exactly what this is about today. So we're getting there, and I think that network has got tremendous potential, and I think the thing we're going to continue learning about is some of these backhaul options and other options
Definitely.
before us. Anything you want to say finally on this, Malcolm, because you've been on quite this journey.
Even if you test it, it still might break. But I think with the other satellites, LEO is very viable. It's very new, Starlink. There's going to be OneWeb. There's going to be Bezos is going. So I think over the next 24 months, the idea didn't quite work today. We saw bits of it working, but there will be LEO backhaul. So yeah.
I think from me, if there's no spectrum, there's no show. Yeah. And I'm working with regulators, and doing that with plenty of advanced warning is key to being able to sort of pop these networks up anywhere that you want.
And that network in a box is available?
It is, yeah. It'll give people a sort of form factor in terms of what it looks like, what it can do. And we're
so come and talk to you guys.
Absolutely.
Do go along and just talk to the team over here. They're all there. There's Sam there who developed much of the engineering. Come and talk to the team. I want to thank the panel up here. Brilliant work over these last few months around the world. Astonishing, really, what you've achieved. So thank you, Cameron. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Paminda. Thank you very much indeed, Malcolm. You've been absolute stars. And thanks to all of our other champions and all of our other participants and vendors that have been involved in developing this. It's been quite a journey over the last 3 years, really. And who knows what's next. Good. We'll come back to you on that.
Watch this space.
Yeah. So thank you for coming along. It's been a great session. Thank you. Thank you. Take care.